Hi, good evening. Just finished listening to the stories segment on NPR for the second time, and I'm just going to go through and kind of say what thoughts I came up with or like what hit me from the piece. I thought if I could pick a tagline from the piece, I'd probably say it's more than a scarf. It was interesting to me to think of it as just how the hijab is kind of understood or conceptualized by the vast majority of people. It's pretty much the hood ornament of Islam in America now. Well, what folks don't really understand, or at least what I'm starting to kind of encounter and reading in this piece, is hijab is kind of a symbol for physical modesty. And it's interesting to me to hear them kind of hit on that later on in the piece. Another thing that I was thinking about was how crazy, like, how many different things hijab means to different kinds of people, and how all sorts of different Muslims kind of deal with hijab differently. And so their decisions with hijab are purposeful, and the way they live is kind of reflected in it. So we're seeing their struggles or their thought processes or their own living of their faith through the hijab. So we should show respect to that because they're living their faith outside, and they're showing us their thought process or their own feelings about it through their decision to wear or not wear. So we should respect either way. It kind of also plays into one of the teenage girls talked about how if any Muslim does something, good or bad, it's painted as this is what Islam is. It's interesting to me, especially when they're talking about being in the restaurant or being loud or whatever, and we forget that they're teenagers, they're teenage Muslims, to where we always think that their religion or their faith kind of has everything to do with how they act, and we forget that people are people. Another thing that I was thinking about was kind of my own talks, or like how I've asked questions of people of different faiths, or things I've wanted to ask, or things I didn't ask because I was worried about how it'd come off, or whatever. And they're talking about how they're constantly fielding questions about hijab, or like what does this color mean, or all these things. And I mean, you might be curious or you might be nervous about how to ask it, but these kind of awkward moments can act as like jumping off points or an easy way to start. If you're curious, why don't you just ask or whatever? I mean, that'd be crazy if we could just ask and just talk to people. That's a crazy idea. Another thing that I really liked from it was when one of the girls said that intention and action have to go hand in hand. And to me, that kind of is a neat way to think of like what hijab is supposed to be. It's supposed to be modesty or whatever. And a person can be modest and not wear hijab, just as someone can, not be modest and wear it every day. So it was interesting to me that to those ladies that were on the video or on the radio, to them intention seemed to be a lot more important than action, or like what they wore was not nearly as important as like how they felt or like what they thought. So it's pretty cool. And another kind of, I don't know, lighter note was I never even thought about the fashion implications of the hijab, or I never thought about the fact that it is just a piece of clothing, just like any other piece of clothing. It's the religious overtones that folks put on it that really can change perceptions or make people think about it in a different way. So overall, interesting piece, especially in kind of like the humanizing nature of it, to where we could hear them, shopping, or like we heard stories from their families of when they first started, and it was pretty interesting, especially having teenagers talk about it, because their perspectives are always pretty interesting. So, new thoughts on hijabs. Yeah, thanks for listening. Over and out.